Welcome. Welcome to the Chemistry of Life, Raj Narayan's Biochemistry Lecture Series, integrating life with updated scientific information, a multidisciplinary approach. Raj Narayan's Biochemistry Lecture Series include a series of lectures which will be uploaded to this channel. The topics of lectures are on specific fields in biochemistry and molecular biology. We hope these lectures will be very useful for students of undergraduate and postgraduate courses as well as researchers in the field of medical, paramedical, public health, biology and other branches of natural sciences. Diploma holders in paramedical sciences who want to update and upgrade their knowledge can also access this channel. Your suggestions and comments are very much appreciated and may help in the improvement of this channel. Most of the topics in this lecture series are prepared in an integrated platform by keeping a multidisciplinary approach that is not usually seen even in biochemistry reference books. Therefore, we suggest these lectures will be highly useful even for practicing medical professionals. The lectures in this series will be useful for competitive entrance examinations like medical entrance examination, medical PG entrance examination, CSIR, UGC, ICMR, JRF NET examinations and PG entrance examinations for basic sciences. Chemistry of Life, Raj Narayan's Biochemistry Lecture Series is scientific, reliable, authentic, precise and simple explanations for the chemical basis of life. Based on the comments and feedback, more detailed explanation videos will be uploaded to this channel in the future. We request not to miss any part of this lecture for getting a complete idea about the chemistry of life. Chemistry of Life, Raj Narayan's Biochemistry Lecture Series. In part 2 of lecture 3, biocatalyst, we are going to discuss about clinical enzymology and enzyme technology. So in this lecture we have included two topics. The first one is clinical enzymology and second one is enzyme technology. Clinical enzymology is an area in enzymology that deals with the study about clinically useful enzymes. What are clinically useful enzymes? Clinically useful enzymes are those enzymes which are useful in the diagnosis of the disease. They are useful in treatment purpose as medicines. They are useful as enzymes target and they are useful in the diagnostic techniques for the diagnosis of different diseases. So clinical enzymology deals with the study of enzymes which are useful in disease diagnosis. We will call them as marker enzymes. Clinical enzymology also deals with the study about enzymes which are useful in therapy. Those who are having therapeutic applications, we will call them as therapeutic enzymes. Clinical enzymology deals with the study of enzymes which forms the targets for different drugs. We will call them as target enzymes. And clinical enzymology also deals with the study about diagnostic enzymes. Diagnostic enzymes are enzymes which are useful as a diagnostic tool for the manufacturing of diagnostic kits. Clinical enzymology is a specific area of medical biochemistry which deals with the application of enzymology in clinical practice. It includes disease diagnosis, disease treatment, disease management, and patient evaluation. There are certain enzymes termed marker enzymes whose level will be indicating of a particular disease state or conditions in our body. There are certain other enzymes called therapeutic enzymes which are very useful as drugs in the treatment of several diseases. There are enzymes which are targets of certain drugs used in the treatment of certain diseases. Certain enzymes are having diagnostic importance. They can be used as a reagent in diagnostic techniques. So clinical enzymology deals with all these enzymes, marker enzymes, therapeutic enzymes, target enzymes, and diagnostic enzymes. Now let's have a discussion on enzymes which are indicators or markers of certain diseases. We will call them as marker enzymes. First, we are going to classify these marker enzymes based on their source and the site of action. So classification of plasma enzymes based on their source and site of action. Plasma contain a wide variety of enzymes which can be categorized into two classes based on the source and the location of its action. Plasma-derived enzymes and cell-derived enzymes. So, marker enzymes present in blood plasma can be divided into two groups based on their source and site of action. The first group is plasma-derived enzyme and the second group is cell-derived enzymes. Plasma-derived enzymes are enzymes which acts on the substrate present in the plasma and its activity is higher in plasma than in the cell. Example, enzymes involved in blood coagulation, we will call them as coagulation factors, and ceruloplasmin that provides the peroxidase activity in the plasma. So examples for plasma-derived enzymes are various enzymes involved in blood coagulation called coagulation factors and ceruloplasmin, a plasma protein that carries copper in the plasma and that also provides peroxidase activity. Cell-derived enzymes are having higher activity in the cell than in the plasma and are overflown into the plasma from tissues and organs. So this is the difference between plasma-derived enzymes and cell-derived enzymes. Plasma-derived enzymes are those enzymes which are having more concentration in the plasma than in the cell. But cell-derived enzymes are having more concentration in the cells than in the plasma. So cell-derived enzymes are having their normal location in the cells, but as a result of cell necrosis, these enzymes will be overflown into the plasma in various disease conditions. Cell-derived enzymes can be useful for the diagnosis of various diseases. Cell-derived enzymes can again be classified into two types based on their specific function. Class number 1, secretory, and class 2, metabolic. Secretory enzymes are those enzymes which are mainly derived from secretory glands and functions in the extracellular space. So secretory enzymes are derived from secretory glands or secretory cells and functions in the extracellular space, and metabolic enzymes are enzymes which are concerned with cellular metabolism and functions within the cell. So this differentiation between secretory type of cell-derived enzymes and metabolic type of cell-derived enzymes is very simple. Secretory enzymes are mainly derived from secretory cells and that functions in extracellular matrix or extracellular space, and metabolic enzymes are those enzymes which are produced within the cell and they are involved in specific metabolic functions within the cell. So for the secretory type, the location is extracellular space, and for the metabolic type of cell derived enzyme, their location, the site of action is within the cell. Or secretory enzymes work extracellularly and metabolic enzymes acts intracellularly or functions intracellularly. So that is a difference. Now, enzymes in the blood plasma can be classified according to their functions. So this is the second criteria. Previously we have classified plasma enzymes into two, plasma derived and cell derived, based on the origin and site of action. Now we are going to apply the second criteria, classification of plasma enzymes based on their functions in the plasma. The first category is functional and the second category is non-functional enzyme. So there are two different types of enzymes in the blood plasma based on their function, functional enzymes and non-functional enzymes. Let us see what are functional enzymes. Functional enzymes are having very specific, highly essential and well-defined functions in the blood plasma. They are present in higher concentration in the plasma than in the cell. They are mainly synthesized by the liver and then released into the plasma. They are clinically very significant when the serum level is reduced below the normal range. So functional enzymes are those enzymes which are having highly specific functions in the plasma and they are having a significance when their serum level is reduced below the normal range. For example, pseudocolloid esterase, lipoprotein lipase, ceruloplasmin and blood coagulation factors are all examples for functional enzymes. Pseudocolloid esterase, lipoprotein lipase, ceruloplasmin that provides peroxidase activity, and blood coagulation factors like thrombin are all examples for functional enzymes in blood plasma. Non-functional enzymes in blood plasma have no specific or essential functions. They are derived from cells of various organs, tissues, and released into the plasma in minute quantities. So they are derived from various cells, organs, and tissues and released into the plasma in minute quantities. Their activity will be higher in the cells than in the plasma. They are present in the plasma in very small concentration under normal condition. They become clinically significant when the plasma level is increased above the normal range. So the clinical significance of non-functional enzymes comes when their level is more than the normal range. So functional enzymes as well as non-functional enzymes are having a very important significance in the diagnosis of various diseases, or the plasma level of these enzymes can be indicative or useful for the diagnosis of various diseases and also to understand the health status of different organs in our body. That is the reason these enzymes are known as marker enzymes. Markers means indicators. They are markers of certain diseases or indicators of certain diseases or conditions. So these enzymes are clinically very important. Possible causes and reasons for increase in the levels of non-functional enzymes in the plasma. Hypoxic and infective insults, disease states of the tissue, excessive synthesis or induction of the enzyme followed by overflow into the plasma, vigorous exercise, decreased renal clearance are all possible causes or reasons for increase in the levels of non-functional enzymes in the plasma. Therefore, these enzymes can serve as indicators of the functional status of an organ or a tissue that produce it, and they are called as marker enzymes. So the definition for marker enzymes is very clear. Marker enzymes are those enzymes whose level will be either decreased below the normal range or increased above the normal range during certain diseases or conditions related to various tissues and organs. So now let us see isozymes, certain isozymes which are useful as marker enzymes in the diagnosis of various diseases. First, let us see what is an isozyme or isoenzyme. Isoenzymes or isozymes are multiple forms of the same enzyme that catalyze the same chemical reaction. They differ in their physical as well as chemical properties such as electrophoretic mobility, kinetic properties like optimum temperature, optimum pH, Km value, amino acid sequence, amino acid composition, that means the structure are entirely different. There are a number of examples for isozymes which are useful in disease diagnosis as marker enzymes. So isozymes are different forms of the same enzyme catalyze the same chemical reaction. They have different structures, they have difference in electrophoretic mobility, they have differences in many physicochemical properties, and they have differences in amino acid sequence and amino acid composition, and they have entirely different optimum pH, optimum temperature, and Km value. And some of the isozymes are useful in the diagnosis of disease. Now we are going to consider some of the important examples for isozymes in our system. Lactate dehydrogenase, LDH. Lactate dehydrogenase is an enzyme present in our body systems distributed in different tissues. LDH catalyzes the reversible conversion of pyruvate into lactate. That process is known as anaerobic glycolysis. The conversion of pyruvate into lactate under anaerobic condition is known as anaerobic glycolysis. LDH is a tetrameric enzyme consisting of 4 subunits. So the structure of LDH has 4 subunits. It is a tetrameric enzyme. We can say it is it can be a homotetramer or it can be a heterotetramer. The subunits are of 2 different types, M or muscle type and H or heart type. So there are 2 different types of subunit, M subunit or H subunit. So there are different isozyme forms of lactate dehydrogenase based on the type of subunits present. There are certain isomers which contain only M subunits, and there are isocyme forms which contain only H type of subunits, and there are isocymes which contain both M type and H type of subunits in their structure. Irrespective of the combination of subunits, the different isocymes of lactate dehydrogenase has the same function, the conversion of pyruvate into lactate and the reverse conversion of lactate into pyruvate in certain circumstances. Let us analyze which are the different isocyme forms of lactate dehydrogenase present in different tissues and cells in our system. There are 5 different isomeric forms of LDH: LDH1, LDH2, LDH3, LDH4 and LDH5. They differ in their subunit composition. LDH isocymes can be separated by cellulose acetate electrophoresis at pH 8.6. The serum normal value for LDH is 100 to 200 units per liter. The normal range in cerebrospinal fluid is 7 to 30 units per liter. This is the enzyme, the quaternary structure of lactate dehydrogenase. You can see 4 subunits, 1, 2, 3 and 4. The conversion, this is a reaction catalyzed by lactate dehydrogenase. The conversion of lactate into pyruvate and pyruvate back to lactate. This is a reaction involving a coenzyme nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide. So these are the different isoforms of LDH. There are 2 different types of subunits, H for heart type, M and muscle type. So LDH1, LDH2, LDH3, LDH4 and LDH5 has different combination of H and M subunit. LDH1 is also known as H4. LDH1 is also known as H4 because it has all the 4 subunits H type. 4 H subunit associate to form the structure of LDH1. So it is also known as H4. It is present in heart and kidneys. LDH2 contain 3 H subunits and 1 F subunit. So it is also known as H3M1 or H3M. It is present in red blood cells and also in heart, kidney and brain. LDH3 has 2 H type subunit and 2 M type subunit, so it is also known as H2M2. It is present in brain, lungs and white blood cells. LDH4 has 1 H subunit and 3 M subunits, so it is also known as HM3. It is present in lung and skeletal muscle. And finally, LDH5 has no H subunit. All the 4 subunits are one type, that is M4. There is no H subunit. So we can see that LDH1 and LDH5 are homotetrameric proteins. LDH1 is H4 and LDH5 is M4. And all others, LDH2, LDH3 and LDH4, they are heterotetrameric proteins. M4, LDH5 can be designated as M4 and it has 4 M subunit, and it is present mainly in skeletal muscle and liver. So the concentration of individual isoforms of lactate dehydrogenase in the blood plasma is indicative of the status, the functional status of different tissues in our body. The different isoforms of lactate dehydrogenase can be separated by cellulose acetate electrophoresis, and these different isoforms will have different mobilities. When we electrophorize different samples such as heart, kidney, RBC, brain, WBC, muscle and liver tissue samples, we will get different electrophoretic pattern. For example, when we run the sample extracted from the heart, we will get more HM3. That means LDH2. When we electrophorize kidney, we will get LDH2 and LDH3, more concentration of LDH2 and LDH3. When we do the electrophoresis of red blood cell samples, we will get again more LDH2. If the brain sample is used, we will get LDH2 and LDH3. If we use WBC, we will get more of LDH3 and little amount of LDH2 and LDH4. And in the case of muscle, LDH3 and LDH5 dominates. In the case of liver, LDH5 dominates over all other isozyme forms. So this is the normal electrophoretic pattern. When we do the electrophoresis of plasma, if we use the plasma sample, all these LDH isozyme forms will be present in the plasma. You can see here LDH1 will have less mobility, LDH2 will stands next, LDH3 will stands next, after that LDH4 will come, and finally LDH5 will have the highest mobility in plasma gel electrophoresis. So the different isozyme forms of LDH will have differences in electrophoretic mobility, and from the intensity of the band obtained, we can understand which isoform is present in the highest concentration in the blood plasma, and from this pattern we can have an idea about the functional status of the concerned organ. So LDH1 or H4 is the fastest moving isozyme. It is present in myocardium, RBC and kidney. So the concentration of LDH1 will be increased in the plasma during myocardial infarctions. LDH2, that is H3M1, is indicative of kidney diseases and megaloblastic anemia. LDH3, that is mainly present in the brain, and it may be elevated during leukemia and malignancy. LDH4 is mainly available in lung and spleen, and it may be indicative of pulmonary infections. And LDH5, that is M4, and it is the slowest moving in plasma electrophoresis pattern, and it has high concentration in skeletal muscle and liver. And if the plasma level is increased above the normal, or if the band of M4, that means if the first band dominates over the others in plasma gel electrophoresis, that indicates skeletal muscle and liver disease. In human plasma, LDH1 is usually present at a concentration, that means it will be 30% of the total activity. LDH2, 35% of the total activity. LDH3, 20% of the total activity. LDH4, 10% of the total activity, and LDH5, 5% of the total activity. That means LDH2 is the most dominant of all isozyme forms in the plasma. LDH1 comes second, next comes LDH3, then LDH4, and the least percent is for LDH5. Now we are going to discuss the clinical significance of relative amount of LDH. Let us see various conditions. For example, in myocardial infarction, there will be moderate elevation of LDH1 and significant slight elevation of LDH2. So, the LDH1 to 2 ratio can be indicative of myocardial infarction. In the case of acute hepatitis, there will be large elevation of LDH5 and moderate elevation of LDH4. In muscular dystrophy, there will be elevation of LDH1, 2 and 3. Megaloblastic anemia, there will be large elevation of LDH1. In sickle cell anemia, moderate elevation of LDH1 and 2. In arthritis and joint effusions, there will be elevation of LDH5. So this is the clinical significance of moderate amount of different isoforms, the relative amount of different forms of isoforms of LDH. Usually LDH2 is present in the plasma in more quantities than LDH1. LDH2 is present 35% and LDH1 contribution is usually 30% in a normal person. But during myocardial infarction, the LDH1 concentration will be more than that of LDH2. In megaloblastic anemia, 50 times upper limit of LDH1 and LDH2. In muscular dystrophy, LDH5 elevated. Toxic hepatitis with jaundice 10 times more of LDH5. In renal tubular necrosis and polyonephritis and pulmonary embolism, LDH3 in massive destruction of platelets. So, the analysis of the concentration of different isozyme forms of lactate dehydrogenase will be helpful in understanding the health status or the functional status of different organs and tissues, and also it will be helpful for differential diagnosis of the disease. We have already discussed the clinical significance of LDH. Let us round up. LDH2 is the predominant isozyme in the plasma and LDH5 is present in least concentration. In the plasma during myocardial infarction, LDH1 level will be greater than that of LDH2. We have already discussed this thing. In megaloblastic anemia, almost LDH1 and LDH2 will be 50 times as that of normal. In muscular dystrophy, LDH5 level will be elevated. In toxic hepatitis and jaundice, LDH5 will be almost 10 times high as compared to normal. In renal diseases such as tubular necrosis, pyelonephritis, and in pulmonary embolism, LDH3 level will be increased. Total LDH value will be increased in neoplastic diseases. LDH5 will be elevated in breast cancer, central nervous system malignancy, and in prostatic carcinoma. LDH2 and LDH3 will be increased in leukemia, in malignant tumors of the testes and ovaries. LDH2, LDH3 and LDH5 levels will be elevated. In cerebrospinal fluid, the LDH isozyme forms will be useful for differential diagnosis. In bacterial meningitis, LDH4 and LDH5 levels will be elevated. In viral meningitis, LDH1 level will be higher. So, in order to differentiate bacterial and viral meningitis, between bacterial and viral meningitis, analysis of LDH isozyme levels in cerebrospinal fluid will be very helpful. In bacterial meningitis, LDH4 and LDH5 levels will be elevated, whereas in viral meningitis, LDH1 level will be higher than normal. In metastatic tumors, LDH5 level will be higher. So, for the differential diagnosis of different diseases related to brain, LDH isozyme analysis in cerebrospinal fluid will be helpful. Another isozyme that will be useful for disease diagnosis as marker enzyme is creatine kinase. Creatine kinase is a marker isozyme that catalyzes the conversion of creatine to creatine phosphate. Creatine kinase is also known as creatine phosphokinase or CPK. It has three isozyme forms. CPK is a 40 kilodalton molecular weight enzyme. There are two subunits, so we can call it as a dimeric protein. It is having a quaternary structure containing two tertiary structures, two subunits, so we can call it as a dimeric protein. There are two different types of subunits present in CPK. CPK-MB, this B refers to brain, so CPK brain type and CPK muscle type. So there are two different types of subunit, B subunit and M subunit. B refers to brain and M refers to muscle type. Depending on the combination of different subunits, there are three isozyme forms. CPK1, also known as CPK-BB, that means both subunits are of the B type. So we can say CPK1 is a homodimeric protein with two subunits, both are B type. And CPK2 has one M type subunit and one B type subunit. So we can say CPK2 is a heterodimeric protein. It is known as CPK-MB, and CPK3, also known as CPK-MM, it has two M-type subunits or muscle-type subunits. So CPK3 is also known as CPK-MM. It is also a homodimeric protein containing two M-type subunits. So CPK1 or CPK-BB and CPK3, CPK-MM are homodimers but has two entirely different subunits. CPK1 has BB subunit and CPK3 has both MM subunit, two MM subunits. So they are homomeric enzymes, but CPK2 is a heterodimeric protein. One subunit is M type and the other subunit is B type. So we can say it is a heterodimeric protein. Irrespective of the subunit combinations, CPK1, CPK2 and CPK3 has the same function as we have mentioned before. It is involved in the conversion of creatine into creatine phosphate, phosphorylation of creatine into creatine phosphate. CPK is an important enzyme in energy metabolism. CPK is important for the formation of creatine phosphate, the immediate source of energy for muscle contraction. So, creatine phosphate is the immediate source of energy for muscle contraction. It is a high energy molecule present in the contracting muscle tissue. So the reaction is shown here. Creatine is phosphorylated to creatine phosphate. Creatine phosphate is a high energy compound for muscle contraction. It provides its supply energy for muscle contraction. This reaction is catalyzed by creatine kinase enzyme. Creatine will undergo spontaneous cyclization to form creatinine. Creatinine is a waste product. It is a product of muscle metabolism, and usually creatinine is cleared by the kidney. These are the three different isozyme forms of creatine kinase: CPK1 or CPK-BB, CPK2 or CPK-MB, and CPK3 or CPK-MM. CPK3 has the least electrophoretic mobility, and CPK1 has the maximum electrophoretic mobility, and CPK2 or CPK-MB has the intermediate or medium electrophoretic mobility. CPK3 is present in skeletal as well as heart muscles and contribute 97 to 100% of the total activity in the plasma. CPK-MB constitute 0 to 3% of the total CPK activity in the plasma, and CPK1 has no activity in the plasma in normal condition. So majority of the activity in the plasma is contributed by CPK3 or CPK-MM, 97 up to 100%, and CPK2 contributes 0 to 3%, and usually CPK1 or BB or the brain form has no activity in the plasma under normal conditions. So this means that zero activity of CPK2 or CPK-MB in the plasma is normal, and up to 3% of total activity of CPK2 in the plasma is also normal. But if the activity is elevated, more than 3% of the total activity, then it indicates certain diseases or abnormalities related to heart muscles, because heart muscle is the origin of CPK2-MB isozymes. And 0% activity of CPK1 indicate normal brain functioning, and in case of abnormal condition or diseases in the brain, little amount of, or there will be CPK1 activity in, even negligible activity of CPK1 in the plasma is indicative of certain abnormalities related to the nervous system or the brain. So this is showing the formation of creatine, phosphate from creatine. The phosphate group for the conversion of creatine to creatine phosphate is provided by ATP. Now let's come to the clinical significance of CPK. CPK 2 is very negligible in the normal plasma, 2% of the total activity, and is usually undetectable in the plasma. During myocardial infarction, CPK2 activity is increased within 4 hours and then falls rapidly. So, high levels of CPK2 activity in the plasma is indicative of myocardial infarction. Usually, the elevation occurs after 4 hours of the infarction, and then the level comes to normal. The total CPK activity is elevated up to 20 times in myocardial infarction. So, for the differential diagnosis of myocardial infarction, 2 parameters are important: the total CPK activity, that will be elevated 20 times than normal during myocardial infarction, and specifically CPK2 activity will be elevated after 4 hours of infarction. So this is the clinical significance of CPK2 isozymes. CPK3 activity is specifically elevated in muscular dystrophies. CPK1 level is highly elevated in crush injury, fracture, and in acute cerebrovascular accidents. Usually, estimation of total CPK is usually employed in muscular dystrophy, CPK1 in brain diseases, and CPK-MB during myocardial infarctions. So CPK1, CPK2, and CPK3 all have uses in differential diagnosis of different conditions and diseases. CPK1 during cerebrovascular accidents and crash injuries, CPK2 in myocardial infarction, and CPK1 in brain diseases. CPK-MB, CPK2 in myocardial infarction, and the total elevation in CPK activity is also noticed under certain conditions. Now let's see the atypical forms of CPK. There are 2 unusual forms of CPK, macro CPK and micro CPK or CPK-MI. Macro CK is formed by association of CPK-MB with IgG or IgA, also formed by the association of CPK-MB with lipoproteins, electrophoretically migrated between CK-MB and CK-MM, usually occurs in women above 40 50 years. So these are some modified type of CPKs. Macro CPK formed by the association of CPK-MB with IgG or IgA, also formed by the association of CPK-MB with lipoproteins, and electrophoretically it comes between CK-MB and CK-MM, and usually it is seen in the plasma of women above 50 years. MI-CPK, it is also known as mitochondrial CPK isozyme. It is found attached to the outer surface of the inner mitochondrial membrane of muscle, liver and brain. So MI is not for micro, MI is for mitochondria. CPK, MI, it's for mitochondrial. It refers to the location where it is seen. It is attached to the inner mitochondrial membrane, outer surface of the inner mitochondrial membrane facing the intermembrane space. In electrophoretogram, it is present behind CK-MM band. It is not present in normal plasma. Clinical significance of mitochondrial creatine kinase enzyme. It occurs in the plasma when there is extensive tissue damage that causes the breakdown of mitochondrial membrane. Its presence in serum also indicate cellular damage in malignancies. So these are the two conditions when the CK-MI level will be increased. One is extensive tissue damage and breakdown of mitochondrial membrane, and it is also elevated in cellular damage during malignancies. So these are also having diagnostic significance, both mitochondrial CPK and macro CPK. Another important enzyme which have isozyme form is alkaline phosphatase. Alkaline phosphatase is a non-specific enzyme. It hydrolyzes aliphatic, aromatic and heterocyclic compounds produced mainly in osteoblast of bone and is associated with bone calcification process. Little amount of alkaline phosphatase is also produced by epithelial cells of biliary canaliculi. There is also many other sources, liver, intestine and WBC. It is localized in the cell membrane. It is an ectoenzyme. So it is a membrane bound enzyme. It is present attached to the surface of the cell membrane, plasma membrane. So we can say it is an ectoenzyme localized at the surface of the cell membrane. And the main function is calcification of the bone. It is associated with the transport of phosphates in the liver, kidney and intestinal mucosa. So these are additional functions. Also it has function in the transport of phosphates in the liver, kidney and the intestinal mucosa. Normal range in the plasma is 40 to 125 units per liter. In children, increased levels are observed because of increased osteoblast activity. So in adults, the normal range is 40 up to 125 units per liter. So alkaline phosphatase is a marker enzyme for many diseases. Let us see how it will be useful for differential diagnosis of the disease. Moderate increase in alkaline phosphatase activity, that means 2 to 3 times of normal. Moderate increase means 2 to 3 times of normal. So moderate increase in alkaline phosphatase activity is seen in hepatic diseases such as infective hepatitis, alcoholic hepatitis and in hepatocellular carcinoma. Very high activity, 10 to 12 times increase, is seen in extrahepatic obstructions, that means obstructive jaundice caused by gallstones or by pressure on bile duct by carcinoma of the head of the pancreas. So moderate activity is seen in infective hepatitis, alcoholic hepatitis and hepatocellular carcinoma. Very high activity is seen in extrahepatic obstruction, that means obstructive jaundice caused by gallstones or by carcinoma of the head of the pancreas. Alkaline phosphatase is also produced by epithelial cells of the biliary canaliculi. Therefore, obstruction of the bile duct with consequent irritation of epithelial cells will lead to the secretion of ALP into the plasma. Drastically high levels, very high increase, is seen in bone diseases such as rickets, osteomalacia, osteoblastoma, metastatic carcinoma of the bone, and also in hyperparathyroidism. So these are very important. Drastically high levels of alkaline phosphatase is seen in bone diseases such as rickets, osteomalacia, osteoblastoma, metastatic carcinoma of the bone, and also in hyperparathyroidism. So moderate elevation is associated with hepatitis. Very high activity is associated with gallstones, usually obstructive jaundice or carcinoma of the biliary canaliculi, and very high levels or drastic increase in plasma level of alkaline phosphatase is seen in bone diseases, various types of bone diseases. So these are the isozyme forms of ALP. ALP alpha 1 ALP, alpha 2 ALP, alpha pre-beta ALP, gamma ALP, and leukocyte ALP. So this pre-beta ALP is very important. That is produced by the osteoblast. 50% of the total ALP elevated in bone diseases is because of the liberation of pre-beta ALP from bones, from osteoblasts into the plasma. And the leukocyte ALP, it is specifically increased in the plasma during chronic myeloid leukemia and is increased also in lymphomas. This alpha 1 and alpha 2 are produced by biliary canaliculi cells and also hepatic cells, and these are usually elevated during liver diseases. So the various isozyme forms, the analysis of various isozyme forms of ALP will be very useful in differential diagnosis of the disease, and also the value of we can get an idea about the functional status of different organs from the overall activity of ALP in plasma. As we have discussed before, mild elevation or moderate elevation is seen in liver disease. High levels are seen in bone, very high levels are seen in diseases related to bone. And moderate, very high levels, moderate levels elevation is seen in biliary damage or liver damage. Then aspartate transaminase, AST, also known as glutamate oxaloacetate transaminase, it is a marker or enzyme of liver as well as of heart. Then sorry, we skipped one slide ahead. Okay, now let's come to the markers of marker enzymes for cardiac disease, for the specific diagnosis of cardiac diseases. Number one is cardiac troponin. They are not enzymes, but now accepted as a reliable marker for myocardial infarction, significant in the early detection of ischemia and in monitoring the patients. Another one is brain natriuretic peptide or BNP, produced by the ventricles of the heart in response to excessive stretching of the heart muscles. Reliable marker of ventricular dysfunction. Number 3, aspartate aminotransferase enzyme or AST, also called glutamate oxaloacetate transaminase, SGOT. It is a marker of liver as well. Then another one is gamma glutamyl transferase or GGT. It is used in the synthesis of glutathione. Glutathione is a reductant in liver and RBC. Gamma-glutamyl transferase is seen in liver, kidney, pancreatic and intestinal cells and also in prostate gland. The normal plasma level is 10 to 30 units per liter. So gamma-glutamyl transferase enzyme is distributed in different cells and the total plasma level is 10 to 30 units per liter. It is moderately elevated in infective hepatitis and in liver cancer. GGT is a very sensitive marker for alcohol abuse. Increased level is observed in the plasma of alcoholics. The relatively high level is usually proportional to the amount of alcohol consumed. So the GGT activity in the plasma of an alcoholics is proportional to the amount of alcohol he consumes. So this is a very sensitive marker enzyme for alcoholism also. And GGT is also a marker enzyme. It will be useful in the diagnosis of many conditions related to many organs and tissues. Then another marker is a nucleotide phosphatase enzyme. It is also known as 5' nucleotidase. Okay, the other name for nucleotide phosphatase is 5' nucleotidase that convert nucleotide into nucleoside. It will cleave the phosphate group attached to the fifth carbon atom of the sugar, and it will convert nucleotide into nucleoside. It is a marker enzyme for plasma membrane damage. It is a marker enzyme for plasma membrane damage. It is an ectoenzyme. Normal level in the plasma is 2 to 10 units per liter. Moderate increase is seen in hepatitis and highly elevated in biliary obstruction, unaffected by bone disease. Okay, it is the level in the plasma is unaffected by bone disease. Now let us come to some other marker enzymes of other organs and tissues. Alanine aminotransferase ALT, also called glutamine pyruvate transaminase SGPT. Previously we have been discussing about SGOT. Now we are going to discuss about SGPT, serum glutamine pyruvate transaminase, also known as alanine transaminase ALT. The serum level is 13 to 35 units per liter. In female 10 to 30 units per liter, very high values. 300 to 1000 units per liter are seen in acute hepatitis or toxic or viral hepatitis. Both AST and ALT levels are increased in liver diseases. Rise in ALT will be noticed even several days before the development of the signs of jaundice. So it is a very good indicator of hepatic damage. Moderate increase is seen in chronic liver diseases such as cirrhosis, hepatitis C and non-alcoholic steatohepatitis. Non-alcoholic steatohepatitis because of the accumulation of fatty liver. Then acid phosphatase enzyme. Acid phosphatase enzyme is also known as ACP. It hydrolyzes phosphoric acid estate secreted by the prostate cells, RBC, platelets and WBC. ACP level is increased in prostate cancer and also in bone metastasis of prostate cancer. Okay, in the later stages of prostate cancer, the cells will be metastasized and it will enter into the bone tissue. So in that stage, the acid phosphatase level in the plasma will be increased. So it is useful in the specific diagnosis of bone metastasis of the prostate cancer. Another one is prostate-specific antigen or PSA. It is produced by the secretory epithelium of the prostate gland. It is a serine protease enzyme. So prostate-specific antigen is a serine protease enzyme. It is secreted by the secretory epithelium of prostate gland. Normally, PSA is normally secreted to the seminal fluid and is essential for the liquefaction of the seminal coagulum. So prostate-specific antigen is a serine protease that is normally present in the semen, and it is very important for the liquefaction of the semen. Semen is usually, it is having a thick texture, but after some time it will be liquefied. So for the liquefaction purpose, this prostate-specific antigen is very important. Normal level in the serum is 1 to 5 microgram per liter, and values up to 10 micrograms per liter indicate prostate cancer. So during prostate cancer, the level of prostate-specific antigen will be increased in plasma level, in the plasma. Then another marker enzyme is aldolase enzyme. It is a glycolytic enzyme. Normal level the plasma is 1.5 to 7 units per liter. It is drastically elevated in the serum during muscle damage, progressive muscular dystrophy, pyromyelitis, myasthenia gravis, and in multiple sclerosis. It is a very sensitive early marker for muscle wasting diseases. Another important marker enzyme is inulase enzyme. It is also a glycolytic enzyme. Neuron-specific inulase (NSC) is an isoenzyme in liver tissue and is a marker of cancer associated with neuroendocrine origin and neuroblastoma. So, inulase enzymes has one isozyme. It is known as neuron-specific inulase or NSE. It is an isozyme form in nervous tissue and it is a marker for cancer associated with neuroendocrine region of the brain. And also in neuroblastoma, the plasma level will be elevated. So for the diagnosis of many important diseases related to the brain, inulase marker enzyme will be useful. Another marker enzyme is beta-glucuronidase. It is abundant in liver, spleen, endometrium, breast, and adrenals. Leukocytes contain very high amounts of beta-glucuronidase. Increased levels are seen in cancer of urinary bladder. Okay, it is specifically elevated in the cancer of urinary bladder. Very high levels are seen in carcinoma of the head of the pancreas and in 50% of the breast cancer. So the cancer of urinary bladder, the cancer of the head of the pancreas, and also 50% of the breast cancer cases, serum or plasma beta-glucuronidase level or plasma beta-glucuronidase activity will be elevated. So it is a very important marker enzyme for the diagnosis of many diseases. Amylase is an enzyme that digests starch as well as glycogen. It is produced by the pancreas as well as salivary glands. Normal serum value is 50 to 100 units per liter. 1000 times of increased activity is noticed in the plasma during acute pancreatitis. Moderate activity is seen in chronic pancreatitis and in the obstruction of pancreatic duct. The lipase is produced mainly by the pancreas. It is hydrolyzed. It hydrolyzes dietary triacylglycerol into monoacylglycerol and free fatty acids in the small intestine. It is moderately plasma lipase concentration. Plasma lipase activity is moderately elevated in elevated in pancreatic carcinoma, biliary diseases, and perforating peptic ulcers. So high activity of lipase is seen in the plasma during pancreatic carcinoma, biliary diseases, and also perforating peptic ulcers. That means very severe stages of ulcers, intestinal ulcers. Another important marker enzyme is choline esterase. It is present in nerve endings and in RBCs. Newly formed RBCs will have high levels of this enzyme and decreased according to the age of the RBC. Organophosphopesticides irreversibly inhibit choline esterase in the RBC. Measurement of choline esterase activity is useful in determining the magnitude of exposure to pesticides. So choline esterase activity in the plasma is very helpful in understanding and determining the pesticide exposure of an individual, because organophosphorus pesticides inhibits acetylcholine esterase activity, in the plasma. Then another important marker enzyme is glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase. Glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase is an enzyme of hexose monophosphate pathway or HMP shunt pathway. It is involved in the production of nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide phosphate NADPH. It is a very useful coenzyme for antioxidant enzyme and also useful as a coenzyme in many biosynthetic anabolic pathways. Normal value in RBC is 6 to 12 units per gram hemoglobin. Glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase activity will be decreased in drug-induced hemolytic anemias. RBC lifespan will be decreased in glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase deficiency in certain individuals. So the genetic deficiency of glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase enzyme will reduce the lifespan of the RBC, because this enzyme is involved in it is present in a pathway that produces NADPH. NADPH is a coenzyme for antioxidant enzyme in the RBC. Antioxidant enzymes are very important for expanding or increasing the lifespan of RBC up to 120 days. So in the absence of glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase enzyme, HMP pathway will be inhibited, NADPH production will be inhibited, antioxidant enzyme activity will be affected, and therefore the RBC membrane will be prone to oxidative stress, and finally the RBC membrane will break and hemolysis occurs. This is known as hemolytic anemia. So glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase is a very important enzyme, and it is a very important marker enzymes for certain diseases. So these are some of the important enzymes, marker enzymes present in humans. So there are certain enzymes which are useful in the diagnosis of heart diseases like CPK, myoglobin, troponin, LDH, and AST. In liver diseases, the major enzymes used are ALT, GGT, ALP. In GI tract diseases, serum amylase and serum lipase. In muscle diseases, serum aldolase and CPK. In bone diseases, alkaline phosphatase is the enzyme. And in serum, in malignancies, acid phosphatase and the prostate specific antigens are the marker enzymes of interest. So we have discussed about the marker enzymes so far. Now let's come to the enzymes which are useful as diagnostic reagents, or we will say diagnostic for the manufacturing of diagnostic reagents and kits. Urease is an enzyme that is very useful for preparing the reagent kit for urea estimation. Uricase is an enzyme that is also very important for the manufacturing of reagent kits for the estimation of uric acid. Then glucose oxidase enzyme is very important for manufacturing of reagent kit for glucose estimation. Then hexokinase enzyme is also useful for manufacturing reagent kits for glucose estimation. Lipase enzyme for TAG estimation. Similarly, alkaline phosphatase enzyme is very useful in ELISA techniques for the diagnosis of many diseases or many antigens. Then restriction endonuclease enzyme is very useful in RFLP techniques, RFLP restriction fragment length polymorphism. Okay, it's a technique in molecular biology. So restriction endonuclease enzyme is very useful. Then reverse transcriptase enzyme is very useful in polymerase chain reaction in PCRs. PCRs it is very important, reverse transcriptase enzyme. We'll say RT-PCR, reverse transcriptase enzyme. Okay. Now let's come to some of the enzymes which are useful as therapeutic or therapeutic purposes or useful as medicines. L-asparaginase enzyme is useful for the treatment of acute lymphoblastic leukemia. Streptokinase enzyme is useful for the treatment of diseases related to the blood vessels, to lyse the intravascular clot. Then the urokinase enzyme is again important for lysis of intravascular clot. Then pancreatin. Pancreatin means it's a combination of trypsin and lipase. It is very useful for the treatment of pancreatic insufficiency. That means oral administration of this pancreatin, it's a combination of trypsin and lipase, will facilitate the digestive process in the intestine in case of pancreatic insufficiency. Then papain. Papain is an anti-inflammatory agent. It is useful for the treatment of inflammatory reactions. Then alpha-1 antitrypsin. It is very useful for the treatment of alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency and also for the treatment of emphysema. Okay, so AIT deficiency will lead to emphysema. So for the treatment of AIT deficiency, the supply of alpha-1 antitrypsin will be very useful. So these are the examples for some of the enzymes which can be used as drugs for the treatment of different diseases and conditions. So these enzymes are known as therapeutic enzymes. Now let's have a discussion about certain enzymes which are drug targets. What are drug targets? Drug target enzymes are enzymes whose activity will be inhibited by certain drugs. So the drugs will be targeting a particular enzyme in a metabolic pathway. So when this enzyme is inhibited, that metabolic pathway will be inhibited so that the metabolic imbalance can be balanced, or it can be maintained, it can be corrected. So that is a principle. For example, cyclooxygenase enzyme is the target of aspirin. You know, aspirin is a drug that is used for relieving the pain and inflammation. Aspirin is an analgesic drug that is used for relieving the pain and the inflammation. We know prostaglandins are the major factors involved in the manifestation of pain and inflammatory reaction, and prostaglandin is synthesized from the 20-carbon fatty acid. Cyclooxygenase enzyme is an enzyme that is involved in the synthesis of prostaglandin from the 20-carbon arachidonic acid. Arachidonic acid is a polyunsaturated fatty acid containing 4 double bonds. So arachidonic acid is the precursor of prostaglandins, and prostaglandins are involved in the manifestation of pain and inflammatory reactions. So aspirin will inhibit the action, or it will inhibit the activity of cyclooxygenase enzyme. So when cyclooxygenase enzyme is inhibited, the prostaglandin synthesis from arachidonic acid will be affected. So there will be a reduction or decrease in the concentration of prostaglandins, so that the pain and inflammation will be relieved. That is the principle. So for aspirin drug, the target is cyclooxygenase enzyme. Similarly, lovastatin is a drug that acts on HMG-CoA reductase enzyme. HMG-coenzyme A reductase beta hydroxy beta methyl butyryl coenzyme, that is HMG coenzyme A. So HMG coenzyme A reductase enzyme is the target for the drug lovastatin. Lovastatin is a hypocholesteremic drug. Lovastatin can act as a hypocholesteremic drug because lovastatin inhibits HMG-CoA reductase enzyme. HMG-CoA reductase is an enzyme that is involved in cholesterol biosynthetic pathway. There are two sources for cholesterol in our body. One is exogenous source and the other is endogenous source. The endogenous source, that means the biosynthesis, cholesterol biosynthesis process. One of the chief regulatory enzyme is HMG-CoA reductase enzyme. So this HMG-CoA reductase enzyme is inhibited by lovastatin, so that cholesterol synthesis will be lowered, and lovastatin can be an effective drug for the treatment of hypercholesteremia. Another enzyme is reverse transcriptase enzyme. It is an antiretroviral drug. Reverse transcriptase enzyme is the target enzyme for antiretroviral drug. Okay, the drugs used for the treatment of HIV is called antiretroviral drug, and this antiretroviral drug targets on reverse transcriptase enzyme. Reverse transcriptase enzyme is responsible for the multiplication of retroviruses like HIV. So this is the target enzyme for antiretroviral drug, and allopurinol is the target enzyme for xanthine oxidase enzyme. Allopurinol is a drug that is used for the treatment of hyperuricemia. Hyperuricemia is a condition characterized by increased levels of uric acid in the circulation. Increased levels of uric acid in the circulation lead to diseases like gouty arthritis, leading to joint damage and immobility. So in order to treat hyperuricemia and all other diseases caused by hyperuricemia, the drug of choice is allopurinol. Allopurinol will act on, or it will inhibit xanthine oxidase enzyme. Xanthine oxidase is a very important enzyme involved in the formation of uric acid in our system. So when xanthine oxidase is inhibited by allopurinol, the uric acid formation, the uric acid production will be decreased. As a result, the uric acid level will be decreased. So we can say allopurinol is a hypouricemic drug used in the treatment of hyperuricemia For allopurinol, the target enzyme is xanthine oxidase. So these are some of the enzymes which are used as drug target. Cyclooxygenase, aspirin, HMG coinerodactase, lovastatin is a drug, and for antiretroviral drugs, reverse transcriptase is the target enzyme, and for allopurinol, xanthine oxidase is the target enzyme. So in this lecture so far we have been discussing about the different aspects of clinical enzymology. We have discussed about marker enzymes, we have discussed about therapeutic enzymes, we have discussed about enzymes as used as drug targets, and also we have discussed about enzymes which are having important use in the manufacturing of diagnostic kits and reagents. Now let's come to the second topic in part 2 of lecture 3. The topic is enzyme technology. Enzyme technology refers to the manipulation or engineering of enzymes for industrial and commercial purposes. So enzymes can be manipulated, enzymes can be engineered, enzymes can be utilized for industrial and commercial purposes. So these things are going to be discussed under enzyme technology. First, let us see the industrial applications of enzymes, the general details about the industrial applications of enzymes. Industrial enzymes are enzymes that are commercially used in a variety of industries such as pharmaceutical industry, chemical industry, biofuel manufacturing industries, food and beverages industries, and the industries manufacturing other consumer products. So in all these different types of industries, enzymes will be very useful. So due to the advancement in recent years, biocatalysis through isolated enzyme is considered more economical than the use of whole cells. Enzymes may be used as a unit operation within a process to generate a desired product, or may be the product of interest. Industrial biological catalyst through enzymes has experienced rapid growth in recent years due to their ability to operate at mild conditions and exceptional chiral and positional specificity, things that traditional chemical processes lack. So because of the high specificity regarding the chiral and the positional characteristics, the enzymes are having advantages over chemical processes. That is the reason why enzymes are having lot of uses in industries, especially in pharmaceutical industry. Isolated enzymes are typically used in hydrolytic and isomerization reactions. So most of the enzymes used in industries are catalyzing hydrolytic and isomerization reactions. Whole cells are typically used when the reaction requires a cofactor. Although cofactors may be generated in vitro, it is typically more cost effective to use metabolically active cells. So there are two conditions to choose between whether to use an isolated enzyme or to use a whole cell. If the reaction requires a cofactor, then the whole cell will be used, and if there is no cofactor for the reaction, then isolated enzymes will be used. How to utilize enzymes in industry? Immobilization. Despite their excellent catalytic capabilities, enzymes and their properties must be improved prior to industrial implementation in many cases. So immobilization is the first step in utilizing enzymes for industrial applications. Some aspects of enzymes that must be improved prior to implementation are stability, activity, inhibition by reaction product, and selectivity towards non-natural substrates. So immobilization refers to the utilization, the engineering and the management of appropriate enzymes, and this process helps to increase stability, its activity, inhibition by reaction product, and its selectivity towards natural substrates. So to improve many of the criteria of the required enzyme, there should be a process known as immobilization. So immobilization of enzymes will help us to improve its quality. It refers to its attachment on a solid material such as a porous support. So the first step in the utilization of enzymes in industry, or the first step in enzyme technology, is immobilization. And immobilization is accomplished by the attachment of enzymes on a solid material such as a porous support, or trapping of the enzyme in a porous support. Here you can see the process of immobilization here. So this is the amine surface with amino groups. The first step is the surface is chemically modified by the addition of some compounds, and through this modified surface the peptides will be added, and to these peptides the enzymes will be attached, and we can say the enzymes will be immobilized. And the enzymes, and when this surfaces holding the enzyme is put in a medium, the corresponding substrate can be converted into the product. So this is the techniques used in immobilization. Immobilization of enzymes greatly simplifies the recovery process, enhances process control, and reduces operational costs. Many immobilization techniques exist, such as adsorption, covalent binding, affinity, and entrapment. So there are many immobilization techniques. Number one is adsorption. Another technique is covalent binding, then affinity, and entrapment. Ideal immobilization process should not use highly toxic reagents in the immobilization technique to ensure stability of the enzyme. If you are using highly toxic materials, the activity of the enzyme will be affected. After immobilization is complete, the enzymes are introduced into the reaction vessel for biocatalysis. So let us see the different techniques used for the immobilization of enzymes into different surfaces or different objects. Adsorption, covalent binding, affinity, and entrapment are the different techniques. Let us see one by one. The first one is adsorption. Enzyme adsorption into carriers functions based on chemical and physical phenomena such as van der Waals forces, ionic interaction and hydrogen bonding. So, enzyme adsorption onto carriers functions based on chemical and physical phenomena such as van der Waals forces, ionic interaction and hydrogen bonding. So, these are the non-covalent interactions involved in the adsorption of enzymes to a particular surface. These forces are weak and as a result do not affect the structure of the enzyme. A wide variety of enzymes carriers may be used. Selection of the carrier is depending on the surface area, the particle size, the pore structure and the type of functional group present. So this is the first technique, adsorption. The second technique is covalent binding. Many binding chemistries may be used to adhere an enzyme to a surface to varying degrees of success. The most successful covalent binding techniques include binding via glutaraldehyde to amino group and N-hydroxysuccinide esters. These immobilization techniques occurs at ambient temperatures in mild conditions, which have limited potential to modify the structure and functions of the enzyme. So, for covalent binding of the enzyme, certain chemicals will be used, such as glutaraldehyde and N-hydroxysuccinide esters. So, these chemicals will modify the surface so that enzymes can be easily bound to its surface. The third one is affinity. Immobilization using affinity relies on the specificity of an enzyme to couple an affinity ligand to an enzyme to form a covalently bound enzyme ligand complex. So, in this case, the principle of affinity immobilization is based on the specific binding between the enzyme with a particular ligand. So, using this ligand, because of the specific affinity of the enzyme to this ligand can be used for the immobilization of the enzyme. The complex is introduced into a support matrix for which the ligand has high binding affinity and the enzyme is immobilized through ligand support interaction. So, with the help of ligand and support, the ligand will be attached to the support and the enzyme will be attached to the ligand. So, the ligand functions as a sandwich between the support and the enzyme. So, this is known as affinity immobilization. The fourth technique used for immobilization of enzyme is entrapment. Immobilization using entrapment relies on trapping of the enzyme within gels or fibers using non-covalent interactions. So, within a gel matrix or within a fiber matrix, the enzymes will be entrapped by using non-covalent interaction forces. So, the non-covalent interactions are responsible for the entrapment of the enzymes within gels and fibers matrix. The characteristics that define a successful entrapping material include high surface area, uniform pore distribution, tunable pore size and high adsorption capacity. So these are the qualities for a gel or a fiber matrix used for entrapment purpose. Now, after the immobilization, the enzymes can be used for biocatalysis purpose. So the enzymes can be introduced into the reaction medium, and once the catalysis is over, once the conversion is accomplished, the enzymes can be recovered from the medium and it can be used repeatedly. So that process is known as enzyme recovery. So enzyme recovery refers to the repeated use or reusing of the enzyme. Enzymes typically constitute a significant operational cost for industry's process and in many cases must be recovered and reused to ensure economic feasibility of the process. Although some biocatalytic processes operate using organic solvent, the majority of the processes occur in aqueous environment involving the ease of separation. Most biocatalytic processes occur in batch, differentiating them from conventional chemical processes. So, recovery of the enzyme is a very important area in enzyme technology. So, as a result of typical bioprocesses, employ a separation technique after bioconversion. In this case, product accumulation may cause inhibition of the enzyme activity. So, the accumulation of the product in reaction media can lead to the inhibition of the enzyme activity. So, ongoing research in like in situ hybridization techniques where the product is removed from batch during the conversion process. So, there are mechanisms or there are ways to remove the product from the medium. As a result of recent advancement in this field. Enzyme separation may be accomplished through solid liquid extraction techniques such as centrifugation or filtration, and the product containing solution is fed downstream for the product separation. So usually the techniques employed are centrifugation or filtration for the separation or recovery of the enzymes from the medium. Now let's see some of the enzymes and its industrial application. The enzyme named Novozyme 435 is very useful for the production of isopropyl myristate or isopropyl myristic acid, and it is highly useful in cosmetic industry. Then another enzyme known as bromelain is very useful as a meat tenderizer in food industry. Then Mupazyme is an enzyme that improves noodle quality and it is very useful in food industry. L-asparaginase is a therapeutic enzyme used for the treatment of lymphatic cancer and it is very useful in pharmaceutical industry. Ficin is a digestive aid. It can be used in pharmaceutical industry. Then urokinase is used in pharmaceutical industry as an anticoagulant. Beta-lactamase is used in pharmaceutical industry for penicillin allergy treatment. So beta-lactamase enzyme is used for the treatment of allergy caused by insulin. Then subtilisins are enzymes. It is usually used in detergents. It's an ingredient of detergents and it is used for cloth washing the clothes, laundry detergents. So these are some of the examples for enzymes used in different types of industries. Here again you can see the classification of enzymes in different industries, and also here also is given some example for enzymes used in the environmental management and also enzymes which are useful in agriculture and food processing. So when we come across the industrial application of the enzyme, as we have discussed before, in leather industry, in detergent industry, in textile industry, in food processing industry, in biofuel industry, in all these industries enzymes are useful. When we come to the environmental application of industrial enzymes, certain enzymes are very useful in the degradation of residual wastes, waste management, and also the detoxification of certain toxic substances in the environment. When we come to agriculture industry, enzymes are useful in as a animal feed additive, so that it will improve the digestive process in the intestine of the animals, the cattle. And also in agriculture, enzymes are very useful for food processing and value addition of different food items, and it is also very important for the storage or improving the shelf life of certain food products. So in various fields, in different types of industries, in environment management and also in agriculture and food industry, enzymes are highly useful. So these are all applications of enzymes. Then industrial enzymes, these are some other some categorization of industrial enzymes. You can see industrial enzymes are of different types: oxidoreductases, transferases, hydrolases, lyases, ligases. Many examples are given here. For oxidoreductase, there is dehydrogenases are there. For transferase, RNA polymerase is there. Then for hydrolases, different enzyme glycosidases are given. Pectinases are there. Then for lyases, pectate lyase is coming under the category of lyases. Then isomerase enzyme, D-xylose isomerase, D-ribose isomerase, all these are industrial enzymes coming under the category of isomerases, and there are also examples for ligases. So this is a summary of industrial enzymes which are categorized according to the IUP and the classifications. Okay, so industrial enzymes belong to all the 6 different major classes of IUVMP classification. Oxidoreductases are there, transferases are there, hydrolases are there, lyases are there, isomerases are there, ligases are there, and all these are having applications in different types of industries. So these are all the uses of protease enzyme in different industries. Proteases are very useful in leather industry, food industry, silk industry, biofilm removal. It is useful for biofilm removal. It is very important for wool biopolishing. Okay, like that, in so many industrial purposes, for many industrial purposes, protease enzymes are used. So these are all advancements in enzyme technology. And finally, let us come to the applications in food industry. In food industry, enzymes are used for improving nutritional quality and improving the bioavailability. It is very important for recovering of new ingredients. It is very important for modification or value addition of food. It is very important for improving the sensory quality of the food. It is increases. It is very important for increasing the yield. It is important for beverage production. It is important in bakery. It is important in meat tenderization. It is important in milk processing industry as a coagulating agent. It is also important to make protein hydrolyzed preparations. So in different types of there are many applications for enzymes in the food industry. You can see here in dairy production, so many enzymes are useful, like lactase, protease, catalases. Then in brewing industry, beta glucosidase, alpha amylase, protease are all useful. In baking industry, glucose oxidase is useful, pectinases are useful. Then in wine and fruit production, pectinase and beta glucanase is useful. Then in meat industry, papain is very useful, and also other proteases are useful. So these are some of the examples for enzymes which are useful in different types of food industries. So we have been discussing about the different aspects of enzyme technology, the technique of enzyme immobilization, covalent binding, affinity, entrapment, etc., etc. And we have been discussing about the applications of different enzymes in different types of industries like food industry, leather industry, pharmaceutical industry, biofuel industry, etc., etc. I hope you have enjoyed the session, and this is the end of this lecture. And kindly watch part 1 of lecture 3 also. So lecture 3 is biocatalyst, that is delivered as 2 parts, part 1 and part 2. This is part 2, and you can get the link for part 1 also in the description, and go through all the lectures in this series, Rajnarayanan's biochemistry lecture series. Thank you for your attention, your comments, likes and dislikes. Thank you for subscription, and protect yourself and society from COVID-19. Thank you so much. So kindly go through the links and watch all these videos in this series. Once again, thank you.